Boker. What? Oh, I better turn this off.
Okay. Today's the last shir before Pesach.
It's getting full. We have to go to the other room.
That's it. So thank you for coming. The semester is over. We'll have
Graduation.
exam review next week. And today's shir, Haggadah shir, is sponsored by Leah and Steve Roth. It's to commemorate the yahrzeit of Leah's father, Leo Slomovitz. The yahrzeit, I think, was yesterday. Hanania Yom Tov Lipa Ben Eliezer. So we thank you for the sponsorship, and may the neshama benefit from the words of Torah. And we're going to learn a little bit about the Haggadah, Haggadah Shel Pesach. Okay, that's what we'll do. You're familiar with the Korban Todah? Or Korban Todah? Yeah, you're familiar with it?
Now I figured it
Translate it. Okay. So, the Korban Todah is a Thanksgiving offering. You go through an experience. You are thankful to the Almighty that you are alive after those events. You show your appreciation. A very significant part of our religion is being appreciative. It defines you as a person. It defines us as Jews. Yehudi comes from the name Yehuda, who is Modeh, Todah. Very important to be a good Jew. So how do you express your thanksgiving? Well, you bring a korban. This is a very unique korban. The uniqueness of the korban is the fact that it comes with many loaves. Described in Parashat Tzav. We actually read about it this past Shabbos. And the way it is stated in the Torah is the following. You bring, believe it or not, 40 loaves. Among these 40 loaves, 10 of them are chametz, 30 of them are technically matzah, not the modern day matzah, which is thin, the historical matzah, which was more like a pita. You bring these 40 loaves. Even among the 30 which were not chametz, they were processed in different ways. So there are 3 categories, 3 types of matzah within 30, 10 of each. You present it with the sacrifice, and the Kohen takes his portion, and in addition, out of the 40 breads, takes one of each type. So you walk away with 36 loaves. And you are told that you are to eat those breads, those loaves, are to be consumed by midnight, meaning you do it at 11:20 a.m. on a Tuesday. These loaves must be consumed by midnight. Good luck.
High carbs.
You got to get
Those
Kobayashi
carbs.
to eat his hot dogs, right? You know, they have those hot dog contests, which is, you get sick by just watching it. So, obviously not. So what do? So
Friends.
Jews, that's what our friends are. Friends are for that, to eat with you, right? So you invite your friends over, and you set a nice table, and on the table you have these loaves. Some of them are chametz, some of them are matzah. And when people come in and they ask, what is this all about? Meaning, by looking at the table, it is quite obvious that you have offered a korban todah. It was obvious that something occurred. Clearly, you are thankful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for some wonderful event. So you ask the person, what is it all about? And as they are munching on these breads, they share with one another. Well, I was on a journey. We were in the sea. Ship was Shvacha Maisa ship. I was in third class, and somehow I survived. I show my appreciation to God, and they say, "Oh, Odul Hashem, Kitov, this is quite wonderful." And everyone together expresses their appreciation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What brought them together is obviously the food, but they walk away with an appreciation of Almighty God. Magnificent. This is the Korban Todah. Fine. Based on that, Abravanel, so we have here a 15th, 16th century authority, tells us that we could suddenly understand the first question of the Manishtana. In other words, the child, the 3-year-old child, sees a bunch of people coming into the house. The 3-year-old child assumes it must be that there was a Korban Todah offered. Why else would so many people be here celebrating, expressing their gratitude? But the child looks at the table. He's a wise little kid here. He identifies the matzah, but he doesn't see any chametz. And for him, this is indeed a thanksgiving offering. You know, one of the sad things, or perhaps I would say that one of the few failures of Jewish education is the fact that they teach kids about Pesach. Meaning, ideally, what the Seder night is really supposed to be, there's supposed to be a shock for the child. He's supposed to expect an evening like any other evening. He is supposed to come to the table and expect it to be like a Friday night or a festive gathering, and things are wrong. And he asks the question because he is actually surprised. But what happens is that nowadays the kids, they already start, especially like this year, by the time Purim passes, teachers are burnt out and kids are burnt out. So you want a lighter topic to teach the kids. So you move into Pesach, which is very exciting, and the kids come home with these thick Haggadahs with 400 questions on the Seder. And you are reading there the Haggadah, and they have their comments and their Vertlach and the Gimatrios, and they have all kind of wonderful things about the Seder. And they, in most cases, are far more educated than the parents, right? Because you are not familiar with all these midrashim and numerical values that are presented. The result is that the only person shocked are the adults, that they have to sit there for hours with the kids. But the kids are not shocked because they know it, they expect it, right? They tell the father, now you're supposed to cover the matzah, because that's what it says in my art scroll. So we blew it. What was supposed to, the ideal Seder would be that you don't tell, and we always had these ideas of trying to work it out, never of course work, that you don't tell a kid anything about Pesach. They come at age 2, they look at the Seder, what is going on here, they wonder. Imagine the impact that would have when you go then and you share with them the story after they see with their own eyes these differences, when the questions are ones not that they read, but they actually feel. That is the ideal, but nevertheless, the reality is that there are structured questions, and the first structured question is Manishtana halayla ze mikol haleilot, explains the Ravanel, that on all other nights, when I see such a festive gathering, when I see people here together, what do you find on the table? Anu ochlim chametz umatzah. That's a korban todah. Halayla hazeh, this night, what do we have? Only matzah. That is the question that the child is asking. Beautiful explanation of the Ravanel. But what's the answer if so? So the Chatam Sofer notes that when we read last week about the inauguration of the tabernacle, the Torah describes offerings of bread that are brought, and it describes breads that are very similar to the Korban Todah, but you only have there the matzah and not the chametz. Explains the Chatam Sofer, the Seder night is not a night when you are thankful for the past, but it is supposed to be a night where you have the experience. You're supposed to live through the Exodus. It has to be a night like an inauguration. You inaugurate yourself into the experience of the Jewish people. You're not being thankful for the past where you would expect, like the Korban Todah, the mix of the Chametz U'Matzah, but only the matzah, because that is what is brought for an inauguration. That is what the Chatam Sofer is telling us. And what we are being told is, Seder night is a night that you are supposed to actually, if you are able, I know that it is a time when we are very exhausted by then. It is a time that a lot of effort goes into it. You're sitting Kenai Nahara at times with young beings that could create challenges. It's very difficult, but at least grab those few moments that you are able to focus and meditate and think about the idea that you are supposed to experience whatever the night is about. Try to think about it, that you are experiencing some kind of inauguration, some kind of personal redemption. That is what we are supposed to achieve during this night, and that's what we're going to try to discuss tonight. What exactly are those emotions that we are supposed to somehow grab on the Seder night? Now, you look at your Haggadah, and you wonder, when was this written? When was it written? Now, I'm not just talking about the final edition, which obviously mentions rabbis of the early 2nd century, and most probably this is a text that was already complete at that time, during the 2nd century, but obviously they had some earlier version. And we know for a fact that there were adjustments made in the Haggadah due to some realities that changed. So we're going to go ahead and try taking a historical approach. Let's try to imagine, right? They have these findings in Yerushalayim every once in a while, where they find, an old seal, an old ring, an old gold coin. I want them to find a Second Temple Haggadah. That's what I'm waiting for, right? You dust it off and you take the Maxwell house on it, and you open it up and you see the Haggadah of the Second Temple. How did it look? Now that is going to be, right, something to celebrate. What would it have? Well, we have a Mishnah, and this Mishnah will indicate, at least to me, that adjustments occurred. So listen to one of the questions asked in the Haggadah. And if you have it in your Haggadah, right, I would buy it off you because it means it's a rare edition. So it mentions in the Mishnah the questions. One of the questions is as follows. Now the classic one, you know that one. But listen to this one. Shebachol halelot anu ochlin basar, tzli, shaluk, umevushal, on all other nights. When we have our meat, it's either roasted, or heavily cooked, or cooked regularly. Halayla hazeh, this night our meat is kulod tzli. All our meat is roasted. Does anyone have it in your Haggadah? No?
Wish. I wish.
Wait a second, you don't get it. Yeah, you wish you want it. The whole shaila, people ask the question every year, what about a pot roast? Is that okay? Is that not okay? What are the guidelines? Right? Those are the questions asked. But what on earth is this Mishnah talking about? It is talking, so obviously we have here a text that is talking about the Paschal Lamb. Obviously this is a text that was used during Second Temple period. This is quite incredible. Now, adjustments had to be made. That question had to be removed. Now you have to you got to have 4 questions. What would the Seder night be with 3? So we found a different one. The different one has to do with reclining. But you see here that there was an older text. So now comes the question, are there other areas in the Haggadah that perhaps were adjusted due to the fact that we unfortunately no longer have the Bet HaMikdash, which was so central for our ancestors in Israel? That's the question I'm going to ask. Next piece of information. The Mishnah tells us that it is important to have a successful Seder night. Your Haggadah has to matchil begnut. It must begin with the disgrace. You have to mention something that's disgraceful in the beginning of the night. However, umisayem, the structure of the Haggadah ends with shvach. We'll translate that as glory. It has to be that there is contrast there. If you don't have contrast, it's not a successful evening. You know, they quote Schopenhauer that people don't appreciate things as is, only if it is compared to something else. It's really a maharal, meaning this is a statement that was made already in the late 16th, early 17th century by the well-known maharal, that you cannot appreciate anything if you don't contrast it to something else. The perfect example is leave Toronto during December, January, and fly down to Florida. Now, you there the whole time. But for us, Nebuch, who don't have that privilege, what do? You get on a plane, and it's freezing here, and you land there. That's contrast. Unfortunately, there's another contrast, and that is the return home, where several times in the morning you're brushing the sand off the shoes, and at night it is the snow off the shoes. That's what a contrast is. And boy, is that painful. So contrast is how we sense things, how we feel things. That's how we human beings work. Seder night is a night that you're supposed to experience redemption, feel redemption. You want to achieve it? You have to contrast. You have to meditate. You have to envision yourself in a state of disgrace. And then you have to envision yourself in the state of glory, of honor. That's the successful Seder night. So in the words of the Mishnah, Matchil begnut umesayem beshvach. Number one. Piece of information number one, provided by the Mishnah. This is the core of the Haggadah. Number two, the Mishnah tells us, Vidoresh, what you are supposed to do. You are supposed to take specific verses from the Torah and darshan them, explain them, not with your own insights. You can add your own insights, but the core has to be the rabbinic tradition. What verses are we to turn to achieve a successful Seder night is the section in Parashat Kitavo, which is in the book of Dvarim, which talks about the Bikurim, when you bring the first fruit and you show your appreciation to the God of Israel. You read from these verses, and these verses talk about the history of the people of Israel. And it starts off with the words Arami, Oved, Avi. Arami, Oved, Avi. I'm not going to translate that yet. Arami, Oved, Avi. And then the Mishnah tells us that you're supposed to continue explaining this portion Ad sheigmor kol haparasha kula. You want to have a successful Seder night? You have to complete the whole parasha, the whole section, the whole paragraph. That's what we are being told. So let me open this paragraph. Now, you know the story. You bring the first fruit, you give it to the Kohen, you make a declaration. Ve'anita, the Torah tells us that you make a declaration in front of the Kohen, and you tell him, Arami Oved Avi. What does that mean, Arami Oved Avi? So, I'll first turn to Rashi, who gives us the rabbinic explanation, is that there was an Armenian who wanted to destroy my father. Lavan, the Armenian, had an agenda, an interest of destroying Oved Avi Yaakov. Okay, that's one way of reading it. Other commentators, ones who work with the most basic reading of the text known as Pshuto Shel Mikra, tell us that Arami Oved Avi, that my forefather was a lost Armenian. So we are not describing here the others, but rather we are describing the state of my forefather. Vayered Mitzrayim, and then eventually he made his way down to Egypt. Vayagar sham b'mateh me'at, vayisham legoy gadol atzum v'rav. These are verses in the Torah that are part of our Haggadah. Okay, it's after only one cup, so we should more or less still have some clarity. And then we continue. Vayareu otanu hamitzrim. You know, the Egyptians, they made us look bad. And they afflicted us. Vaitznu aleinu avodah kasha. It was awful there in Egypt. What do? Vanitzak el Hashem Elokei avotenu. We cried out. Vayishma Hashem et koleinu, vayar et anyenu vet amalenu vet lachatzenu. God saw what we are going through. So what happened? Vayotzienu Hashem b'Mitzrayim. Biyad chazaka, He took us out, an outstretched arm, zor netuya, morah gadol, otot, moftim, wonders, unreal. These few verses take a few minutes at your Seder, it depends, different Sdarim have different lengths. But we break down these verses. And what we are really doing is that on the Seder night, we are not saying, oh, how awesome God is. That's not what we're doing. It's not even appropriate. Who are we? It's like the child, or the 6-year-old turning to Einstein and say, boy, you're such a smart man. That's so brilliant. Right? So there's an insult there. You really understand me, Einstein would respond. But rather, what we are doing on the Seder night is showing our appreciation that we have to do. If the child benefits from the brilliant doctor who could cure the issue he is fighting, so obviously the child turns to the doctor and says, thank you so much for your research and your insight and your effort. That's what we are doing. We are saying thank you. So we turn to this portion that it is in essence a portion of expressing our thanksgiving. So we break down these verses. This is what we are doing, and we analyze those words. So remember in the Haggadah, there's going to be verse and there's going to be explanation. Fine? It continues, by the way, this parasha that the Mishnah tells us. Remember the words? Yigmor, be sure to complete it. Vayevienu el hamakom hazeh. God brought us to this land. Vayitel lanu et haaretz hazot, and He gave us this land. Why? What's the difference between makom and what's the difference between haaretz? We'll see. Eretz zavat chalav udvash. Now this was verse 9 I just read. Vayevienu el hamakom hazeh. He brought us to this place. Is this part of the Haggadah? Does it ring a bell? Meaning the earlier verse, Biyad chazaka bizra netuya morah gadol. Does that ring a bell? I see yes. I see nods. Does Vayevienu el hamakom hazeh ring a bell? It's not there. It's not there. Now the question is, wait a second. The Mishnah just told me, read the whole paragraph. This is a verse that is integral to what's occurring, and boop, it's gone. It's not there. What happened to that verse? Why is it not in the Haggadah? Why is it not analyzed?
We weren't in Israel
Well,
anymore.
okay, so what you are suggesting is as follows. That in the days of the Mishnah, just as they made reference to the roasted meat, they also made reference to the fact they showed their appreciation by reading the verse and saying, thank God that we have arrived to this place. However, after the destruction, it is time to make some adjustments to the Haggadah. One adjustment was, of course, no longer mentioning the fact that we only eat sli, the roast. Another adjustment is that we take this verse and it's no longer here. Okay? That's a suggestion, a very good suggestion. So there is another adjustment that is occurring here. Now, when we read those verses and have the commentary, you know the commentary? Be'oso shtaim, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, where does that from? Where does that come from? So you know that the earliest rabbinic literature is known as the Sifri, Safra, Mechilta, which were basically rabbinic insights, but they weren't structured the way we know the Mishnah as the oral tradition, but rather the way they would teach it and the way they recorded it at the time was they would read a verse and would give their rabbinic commentary. So, on the book of Dvarim, there is something called the Sifrei, or Sifri. And if, for example, I open this Sifri, I have a very old Sifri. Okay, it's not. It's printed in Vilna. Printed in Vilna, probably over about 120 years ago. It belonged to my grandfather, Rabbi Rabbi Milevsky, from the city of Alitus. Alitus. No need to go there.
Where's that?
No need. Oh, you're already planning.
No, where is that?
It's in Lithuania. Maybe. Okay. Actually, the shul there is still standing. My grandfather was a rabbi there from 1930 to 1937 before going to Montevideo. And he has here an old copy of the work of the Malbim. The Malbim, late 19th century. He actually, when he published his work, you find there the Chumash, the text of the Chumash. You'll find Rashi. And he published the Sifri as well. The Sifri. So this is how I have my Sifri. And he decided to place in his Chumash that he was publishing the oldest rabbinic text. So I'm going to, for example, read to you in verse 6. The verse says, Vayareu otanu hamitzrim vaya'anunu. So the Sifri writes, Vayareu otanu hamitzrim, Kmo shekatuv, hava nitchakma lo pen yirbeh, vehaya ki tikrena milchama. And then, for example, when it tells us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out be'otot, zehamate. What am I reading? What is this basically? This is the Haggadah. In other words, where did the Haggadah, when we are told, they had a tradition, this is obviously a very old tradition, that the way you show appreciation in the Seder night is by reading the verses in Parashat Bikurim. So now, during the Second Temple, these were the rabbinic statements, how they were dorish, how they explained Parashat Bikurim. And it became part of the earliest rabbinic commentary on the text, the first. So that makes our Haggadah. Period. Very clear. So now, I'm curious, verse 9, which is the verse, Vayevienu el hamakom hazeh, the section that does not appear in our Haggadah. The one, as you mentioned, was removed due to the fact that, unfortunately, we no longer have a temple. Vayevienu el hamakom hazeh, so says the Sifri, Vayevienu el hamakom hazeh, the Sifri is obviously dealing with the question that it first declares, or we first show our appreciation for arriving in this makom, and then it makes reference to et haaretz hazot. So what is the makom? So the makom ze bet hamikdash. We are thankful that we arrived, and remember, this is Parashat Bikurim. Where was this declaration made? In the Bet Hamikdash itself. So you show your appreciation to the God of Israel. Vayevienu el hamakom hazeh. So far, so good. Fine. Now, this is what we have. Let's continue here. Remember those words, Arami, Oved, Avi? Remember the two approaches you had? So listen to this Sifri. This is going to be a very shocking statement because we don't use this section of it. Arami, Oved, Avi. Says the Sifri. This is the earliest rabbinic insight of this verse. Melamed, you know what it teaches us? Shelo yarad Yaakov le'aram. When Yaakov Avinu left the land of Israel, after his experience where he fooled his dad, escaping from his brother, when he makes his way towards Armenia, to Aram, his departure was Ela, he only had one intention, lehe'abed, to be lost. He went there and his intention was to be a man who is lost. What does that mean? So I looked for other midrashim that perhaps will clarify it a little bit more. And I find a midrash that tells us, Shelo halach Yaakov le'aram ela al menat le'abed min ha'olam. To be lost, in the old country. I was reading about the Slabodka Yeshiva, so I'm a little bit researching now. Slabodka Yeshiva, which is a yeshiva in a suburb of Kovna, and it mentions there that there were students in the yeshiva that during the years leading to the 1905 attempted revolution in Russia were drawn into the issues, and they were attracted to Russian literature and to the socialist idea. And if you would grab a yeshiva boy and shake him, the works of Marx and Engels would fall out of their jacket. In other words, this is what was occurring in the yeshiva. Intellectual challenges. And there were several students that, in the yeshiva language, got trapped by these thoughts and these philosophies, left the yeshiva, and joined the revolution. And this was occurring throughout. It was at least interesting. Today, a yeshiva graduate, you want to figure out, you look up on Facebook, was he successful? Is he holding a job? Not holding it? To those days, yeshiva graduate is he part of the Communist Party? Is he not? Did he make his way to America? So there were many of those who left to America, and unfortunately, for some, going to America was becoming lost. Lost. You had no way of knowing where they were. There was no, and the Rosh Yeshiva, they were really the Mashgiach, I should say, of the Slabotka Yeshiva, known as the Alter from Slabotka, Rabbi Finkel. So he had a son, Ruvaleh, and Ruvaleh was in the yeshiva. He was less attracted to his father's insights, more attracted to the literature and to the times, and escaped to the United States. Gone. No one knows what happened to him. And this is someone from an honorable family. This is what would occur. You would go leave a structured society and come to the Americas in the beginning of the 20th century. You were lost. There was one Slabotka Yeshiva student by the name of Sidney Hillman. Sidney Hillman came to America, but he wasn't lost because he became the leader of the unions in Chicago, and he was a good organizer. He learned something in Slabotka, it seems like. He became a very successful organizer. He was known as the diplomat of labor, and eventually many of the labor laws that came into existence were due to Sidney Hillman. Sidney Hillman eventually joins Roosevelt's cabinet, and he was, not once but twice, he was on Time Magazine's cover, right? Not too many Slabotka graduates get to Time Magazine cover. So there are times that people are lost. Why are they lost? They leave the structure that gives them their identity for whatever reason. They're no longer part of that structure, they're gone. This rabbinic source is telling us that Yaakov Avinu, when he leaves, he feels lost. His intention is to be detached, le'abed mina olam. Very powerful. Now, the question is, it didn't occur. What changed him? Obviously, he arrives there with faith. Obviously, he arrives there and he deals with the significant challenges with faith. He retains his identity. What gave him that ability to shift? In other words, if the text tells us that originally he wanted to leave with le'abed min ha'olam, and it didn't happen, what protected him? So if you remember, he made a U-turn. Yaakov Avinu makes his way, according to rabbinic tradition, to Aram, but then he realizes that he missed a specific place. He goes back to the Temple Mount. He has the dream. And then he realizes something, that God is with him, that even though he has reached a low, he is depressed, he had to fool his dad, he had to steal his blessings, he's being chased by his brother, his world collapsed, and yet the God of Israel is with him. So that is what saved him, that experience at the location of the Temple Mount. So even though he goes into exile, and boy does he go into exile, he has that understanding, that faith, that you could be in the darkest place, emotionally, physically, spiritually, but you have faith that there is still a God with you. This is what occurs, and therefore, even though his original intention was le'abed, to be lost, it doesn't occur. This is what we are being told in this text. Now, with all that information, we can return to the Talmud, and the Talmud asks the following question. If the Mishnah says you must start the evening with the gnut, with the disgrace, there are two ways to understand the disgrace. One way is that it means physical disgrace. We were enslaved. What is the honor and glory? What is the contrast? That you have physical redemption. Now, there's another way of understanding disgrace turning into honor, and that would be spiritual. Spiritual. Two ways to do it. So listen to the words of the Talmud. Talmud asks, my gnut, what exactly is the disgrace we're being told? What should we be focusing on? What should I meditate on Seder night when I'm sitting there and I'm told start off and experience disgrace? experience darkness. What kind of darkness? Rav Amar, so one authority is Rav. Rav is a rabbi. He originates in Israel. He is actually a disciple of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. In the beginning of the 3rd century, he leaves Israel to Babylonia, but he got his education in Israel. And Rav says that the disgrace is the following. Mitchila ovdei avodat gilulim hayu avotenu. Make the following declaration, because Rav argues, Rav is of the opinion that the disgrace mentioned in the Mishnah is spiritual. This is a night that you are not just redeeming yourself physically, you are redeeming yourself spiritually. You feel an emptiness, and then you have a redemption. What is the emptiness? Idolatry. What is the redemption? That eventually we got Torah and a relationship with God. That is the opinion of Rav. Shmuel, next authority, remember Rav, Shmuel. If you study Talmud, you know they often have a different attitude towards things. Shmuel is of the opinion that the disgrace is not spiritual, it is physical. That you were physically enslaved and now you are physically free. So therefore, you are supposed to start off the Haggadah with the words Avadim Hainu lepara b'Mitzrayim. So we have here two approaches, okay? Rav and Shmuel. So we're going to offer the following explanation. Rav originates in Israel. It is possible that in the years, even after the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, in the land of Israel, they still retain a structure of the Haggadah that was similar to the old structure, to the temple times Haggadah. In Babylonia, on the other hand, where, by the way, in Babylonia, they did not value the second temple so much. For them, the second temple, they viewed it as some temporary structure that anyway is not going to last. They had a Haggadah that was most probably closer to the Haggadah we are familiar with. And what we're going to argue is the following, that Rav was of the opinion that this is a night that you are supposed to focus on the spiritual redemption. The exile, the fact that we were pagan is the dark side. The light is that eventually we have a temple. And as you remember, during the temple period, when they read the psukim from Parashat Bikurim, they read verse 9, and they would declare, Vayevidenu el hamakom hazeh. God brought us to the temple. Meaning, the Seder night was all about expressing or showing that we were in a spiritual darkness, which was idolatry, and now we finally have a relationship with God. So what would end their text? What would be the last reading from the text of Bikurim? The verse where we declare, Ze Bet HaMikdash, mission accomplished. So for Rav, who was from Israel, who followed the structure of a Haggadah that was used during temple times, his Haggadah started off with mentioning the fact that we were pagan, and now, thank God, we have a relationship with the God of Israel, with the Bet HaMikdash. That was his structure. Shmuel, on the other hand, is taking the Babylonian approach. The Babylonian approach is an approach where you don't focus on the spiritual, you focus on physical. We were enslaved, now we're not enslaved. And therefore, there's no need for verse 9. What ends the quote from Parashat Bikurim? Vayetzienu Hashem miMitzrayim. The enslavement, we were enslaved in the past, and we no longer are enslaved. These are the two ways how we could go ahead and view Rav and Shmuel's disagreement regarding the Haggadah itself. You know, it's interesting that if you look at our Shemona Esrei, there is a blessing that goes Ga'al Yisrael, Re'ena ve'anyenu. And we say, God of Israel, we say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Ga'al Yisrael, Redeemer of Israel. Is that a blessing where we thank God for redeeming us in the future? Is it a blessing that we are thankful for the redemption of the past? So clearly not, because if you look at the structure of our Shemona Esrei, the blessings that have to do with national identity and national welfare only begin later. Only when we start talking about Hashiva Shaftenu Karishna, returning of our judges. Only when we start praying for a return to Jerusalem, Yerushalayim Ircha. Only when we start asking for the kingdom of David. That is the section that focuses on our national identity. So what exactly is the blessing of Ga'al Yisrael Redeem? What is that all about? And it seems to be that a person can find redemption even in exile. When a person recognizes that there is a God of Israel, and that whatever occurs for a reason, and that there is nothing random. So that itself is a redemption. And our whole life, when it comes to prayer, it is all about recognition that there is a God. Two people, right? Two people could be getting all the blessings in the world, all the health and all the wealth. There are those who recognize that it's a gift from the God of Israel. They experience a redemption. And then there are those who don't. The first prayer, the Ga'al Yisrael there, is a redemption in exile itself. And that, of course, is derived from Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu, his original intention is, go to Aram, I'm a lost man. Leha'abed mina olam. But what occurs is that he has this magnificent experience, a revelation that occurs at the Bet HaMikdash, and he merits a redemption prior to going through exile. You have redemption with you. Okay, this is just a point there, but our main idea and what we covered tonight basically is Seder night is a night that you're supposed to feel the experience. You're supposed to actually somehow find a way of sitting down and thinking that I am having this experience. And by the way, you have the Rav approach and the Shmuel approach. We do both. We mentioned the fact that Avadim Aynu Leparo B'Mitzrayim. We mentioned the fact that our history begins and you're supposed to experience the physical enslavement. And we also make reference to the fact that Mitchila of Dei Avodah Zarah Yu Avotenu, that we were pagan, that we were lost. And then throughout the night, what you're supposed to somehow feel is the freedom, and you're supposed to feel also the experience, the relationship that we merit with the God of Israel. That's what we hope to do during the Seder night. Thank you, everyone, for coming over the past few months. It was indeed a privilege, and everyone should have, we'll see you by Pesach, but nevertheless, a Chag Kasher v'Sameach to everyone, and may your Seder night and your whole Pesach be one of good health, and please come sane to the Seder. Don't do too much spring cleaning, especially the ones that are not necessary, like curtains, but focus on what is... What? You did it already. And even the cooking, you don't have to have 6 types of kugel. You could go, it's not a necessity, just main thing is that you walk in and appreciate the gift of the Jewish holidays. Thank you so much, and have a good day.